Thanks for this opportunity to join you guys and share some of what we do over at dominKnow Learning Systems. Today we're going to be looking at some of the things you need to be thinking about as you're looking at implementing an mLearning project or an mLearning product roadmap for your organization's overall learning and development training cycle and training programs. My name's Chris Van Wingerden. I'm Vice President of Learning Solutions at dominKnow Learning Systems. And when we start working with clients who are thinking about going down the road of mLearning, we really encourage people to look at a few structural things within their organization first before just simply deciding to make something that's going to run on an iPhone or run on an iPad, etc. We kind of break things down into 4 categories that people need to think about and look at for their organization before they get started. We break them down in buckets, but these buckets have a lot of overlap as well. We tend to want organizations to look at their people, to look at the technology around mobile learning, to look at the content aspects that they want to be able to move to a mobile format, and as well then always focusing on the business value of the content and the program that you're putting together. So as I said, we think of these as 4 areas to look at from an analysis process and getting started, but there's a lot of overlap and these influence each other as you go along. But what we're going to do is we're going to run quickly through each of these buckets, think about some of the things you need to be doing and thinking about, asking questions, gathering information, etc. as part of the process of planning out how you're going to bring in an mLearning program for your company. So the first place we'll start, and we really strongly highlight this as a starting point, are the people in your organizations themselves. A lot of companies, when they start to do mLearning, they're looking at something. The first question they kind of ask about people is, who has mobile devices within the organization already? And that's a common sense place to start. You've got people with smartphones in their hands, or maybe your sales team has got tablet devices, etc. That's kind of a no-brainer in some ways. But we also like to remind people as well, don't just ask about who's got mobile devices, but more importantly, ask who needs mLearning? In other words, where are the people and who are the people who could be helped best by moving to an mLearning product or an mLearning courseware approach? When you start to ask that question, who needs mLearning, we don't just mean asking yourselves. Actually go out and ask the people themselves in your organization. You'll be surprised by the number of things that people have already thought of and said, hey, if only I could get this on my phone, that would really, really help me. And if you're solving problems for those people, you're automatically solving problems for your organization as well. But the key is to ask them to think about how mLearning could help, where they could be helped by, not just asking them if they want mLearning, because everybody wants mLearning, because that's cool. Also, when you're thinking about people, you want to think about whether you're focused just on employee-based training, in other words, people internal within your organization, or are there opportunities as well to bring mobile learning content to your clients or to partners or other external people. Some really neat uses of mobile content actually put information in the hands of in a retail model, for example. Putting that content and that information in the hands of your actual customers can go a long way in helping the sales cycle, answering questions, those sorts of things. But we often think of mLearning as something that you're going to do only within your organization. And do these different people have the same needs or different needs? And what's the problems that you're going to be looking to solve with your program for these different people as well? When we're looking at people, there's always some things to think about as we do our analysis steps towards building our mLearning content. The question of readiness. A decade ago, when companies were introducing their e-learning programs, we had to do a lot of up-training just to make people ready to be able to take an e-learning course. Mobile devices are so common, you might think it a no-brainer. It's easy enough. Everybody can use a smartphone, etc. But you may need to be looking at the audiences for your learning content and say, are they ready to actually use smartphones to be able to get that content, or working with tablet devices? You may need to put a plan into place for that, around that aspect of things. And what are the expectations of the various people who are going to be wanting to access content? What kind of stuff do they expect to be able to do, and the needs that they have around the things that they're going to be looking for from their mLearning programs? Sometimes we also have to make policy decisions. Something that happens a lot is that as mobile devices become more and more common, more and more people have their own mobile devices. You're not just necessarily limited to the people who are using company-issued devices. So do you actually have to have any policies around what devices can be used, when, where, how, etc. for your mLearning content? So those are some things to think about for people. Good ways to gather information and focus your ideas and your thoughts around that aspect. The second place that we suggest people start to go then is the technology itself. Too often technology seems to be the first thing people want to think about with the mobile learning programs, but start with the people, move on to the technology then. Some of the things we encourage people to think about with technology include the devices themselves, obviously. That's the first thing that springs to mind. And most typically with mobile devices, people are thinking about mobile phones, and more particularly smartphones and now even tablets as well. But keep in mind that there are lots of other devices that you could be taking advantage of for learning programs within your organization. MP3 players, for example, podcasts, audio and information, etc. A very easy way to get started in mLearning, for example. So think about those devices, but try to think beyond just the smartphones and the tablets if those can serve the purposes that you need. So a quick question, to think about, because most of us think about a smartphone, etc. But is your organization going to be in a position where you're really able to focus on just one type of operating system? In other words, is everybody in your device going to be using all smartphones as iPhones, or are you actually in a position where people are smartphones and some people are on Android devices and some people are on BlackBerry? The range of different operating systems and some of their different behaviors, etc. Is usually wide open when you start to look at mLearning. And it's very rare that you can actually make something that's just going to work on one type of a device. Most often you're looking at 2, 3, 4 devices. You have to think about that cross-device kind of aspect of things. One of the things that we also help people with in doing then when they're looking at these multiple device products is we make sure that we focus them on the right technology for delivery. And for the e-learning space, Flash has become a really important thing over the last decade. So many tools beyond Flash itself, so many tools also use Flash as a delivery mechanism, as the file format. And there are some really great things that Flash can help us do, but so many of the mobile devices don't support Flash in the browser anymore. It causes a real problem for people. No doubt, though, if you've been thinking about mLearning, you've now heard about HTML5. So let's take a couple of minutes here and just talk a little bit about HTML5, because it has been touted as the thing that replaces Flash for mobile devices. One of the first things that I like to explain to people about HTML5 is that it's not just HTML5 itself. It's actually HTML5 and some stuff around JavaScript and some stuff around cascading style sheets. That whole package of stuff together is what people are actually talking about as the tool set for being able to do engaging learning content on mobile devices without requiring Flash. So it's a kind of a combo package of things that you work in. Now the truth is you don't need to know HTML5 or JavaScript or cascading style sheets or any of those programming languages, because there are a growing number of tools that can help you do these things. But it's kind of important to know that there's a lot of things being brought together to replace Flash in what you're doing. So in HTML5, it's an ongoing standard. It's not been completely finalized at this point. But some of the things that are already in place and are on the verge of being finalized, new ways of delivering audio and video that don't require a Flash-based player for you to be able to provide that content. The canvas tag, which helps you do things like illustrations, visual components, and working with some of the things in the JavaScript suite of things, being able to do animated content, stuff that Flash has always been great at, being able to do that in that HTML5 combo pack now. Some neat stuff around geolocation, knowing where someone is actually standing at the moment that they're actually accessing some content. And also from a perspective of data management, HTML5 has new offline storage options as well that are quite helpful. So all of the things that we traditionally relied on with Flash for the rich media experience of the visual appeal, animated content, interactive content, etc., as well as consistency, because Flash really became strong because it was the one thing that you could make something in, and it didn't matter what browser someone was accessing the content in. It didn't matter what platform they were on. Flash brought a lot of consistency to the content that you were making, which is what made it so successful overall. Those things now, we're turning to HTML5 and its associated technologies to be able to do those same sorts of things on mobile devices. So HTML5 is something that a lot of people have heard and are looking to be able to leverage, etc. When we're thinking then about technology as well, the devices themselves bring up a few questions. Not just how we're going to put content on those devices, but who actually owns those devices, for example. A lot of companies have company-issued cell phones and smartphones, sometimes even tablets, but a lot of employees have their own devices as well. So you may have to work out some wrinkles around the ownership of the device and the accessing of company content on, say, a device owned by by employee members. There may also be associated costs. If your cell phone plans are largely focused on voice communication, you may have to be looking at adding data plans, etc. And particularly if it's an employee device, do you actually have to fund the employee device to a certain extent in order to fund their data plan if they're accessing company content or expected to be on their own cell phone, for instance? There are a couple of other technology things that are important to keep in mind as well, part of the technology landscape of your mLearning program. One of these is obviously the learning management itself. If you have an LMS in place in your organization, is it already set up to be able to handle people accessing content from a mobile device? Do you have to look at something else as an alternative, either another full LMS to replace, or something to add on or to supplement what you've got in place? And do you have any IT infrastructure issues, things like firewalls or security issues that may get in the way of people actually accessing content, or may cause concerns for you, or even the very nature of your content? Does it have to have a certain level of security attached to it? Those are all important things to think about beyond just the devices themselves, with the technology aspect of what we're looking at when we're planning out our mLearning programs and just getting things underway. So if you've spent some time looking at people, and then you've checked out and gathered information, et cetera, around your technology landscape, another place to turn to, another bucket to make sure that you've spent some time doing an analysis process on, is the content itself. What are you going to be doing in your mLearning programs? So a decade ago, an awful lot of organizations went through this process. When they started looking at e-learning programs, they said, we have a library of training manuals and we need them as e-learning. And unfortunately, a lot of people are asking a similar question now in terms of mLearning. We're seeing people say, we have a library of e-learning courses and we need those as mLearning. We strongly encourage people to rethink this process. Don't simply strive to take everything that you're currently doing in an e-learning format and make it mLearning. There are a lot of business factors involved that you should be thinking about in terms of what should be focused on in your mLearning project. But going from this model of doing what we're currently doing in e-learning and just simply trying to push that to a mobile device actually leads to some really poor results in terms of a learning experience overall. Mobile devices are different than laptops in that we have devices, and the environment that those devices are in can be a lot more varied than say the typical workstation that someone might be working at in their office, in their cubicle. That device can be on someone's hip in an airport. It can be on the train, traveling in a car. Could be sitting in a hotel. And a lot of those places, that environment is actually a noisy place, a lot of background and distraction, etc. So the ability to focus on e-learning or mLearning on a smaller device is really influenced by the environment in which you're actually trying to access that content. So it's a little different than the laptop approach. We feel that the move to mobile learning is also a great chance to move from just-in-case type training, which so many of our training programs are stuff you might need, so we're going to try to give you everything, to moving to a just-in-time model. So the things that you need when you need them, getting access to those from your mLearning program. It's a great concept brought forward and iterated or presented to us by Dr. Gary Woodall in his book, The Mobile Learning Edge. A really nice phrasing of that, the moving from just-in-time or just-in-case to just-in-time training. So that actually makes the move to mLearning, in a lot of cases, fairly simple on the whole. You can move to things like job aids or performance support tools, case studies, product information, or coaching and tips types approaches. You don't have to do a full formal learning program to get started in mLearning. These are great ways to solve problems that people actually have as they're carrying out their jobs and supporting them in their actual work in progress type mode. Something around those types of tools, it's a classic keep it simple, stupid approach, the KISS approach. Keep in mind that the faster someone needs some information on the job, there's a lot of argument that there should be a simpler design model for getting that information into people's hands. You don't need to make a great big overblown simulation for something if somebody's just looking for some product information quickly to answer a question that a client might have. That's not to say that that mobile's only good for those just-in-time and performance support. It really does have a lot of roles that you can play for formal learning. We can bring it into the full range of the learning and development programs that you've got in place. But the important thing to think about is not only can it help you in all of these areas, but it does it best if we start to think a bit more effectively about the way that we're designing and creating our content for our e-learning programs. These are a couple of quotes from Clark Quinn in his book Designing mLearning, which is a very valuable resource as you start to think about the actual content that you're going to make for your mLearning program. So there are a lot of tips from an instructional design perspective that you can leverage for a formal learning program on mobile devices. Tools like a scaffolding approach, which could include things like short courses, remediation courses, short assessments, practice exercises, refreshers, things that are very simple, very quick and easy to take, which support other learning programs, for example, and leverage other training modes and modalities. And something that always comes up when you talk content on mobile devices, particularly for mobile learning, the decision point that a lot of companies need to make is whether they're going to try to focus on something that's an actual app on the device or stuff that's going to be delivered through the browser. And there are pros and cons for both of these things. Apps are great because they're always available. It doesn't matter if John's on the airplane and has no cell connection or whatever. He can always take that course or do that review that content. And apps can have a huge sophistication level. You think of the experiences we have with things like Angry Birds, etc., strong visual sophistication, etc. The cons of a device, on-device apps include things like the potential cost of development. They can get very, very expensive to make and to distribute. For different devices, you have to have different versions of the apps as well. If you need a different app for an Android device than say an iPhone, for example. And you also have to then deal with app stores to be able to deliver that to put it onto your team's actual devices, generally speaking. And the updates to the app can also be sometimes a hassle, not only for cost, but also because of the fact you've got to get them into the app store and then deliver it out to everybody's phones, etc., for updates. Browser-based content, which is the way we traditionally do an e-learning course. You open up your browser, you log into your LMS, and you're using the browser on a device. Some of the pros for a browser-based approach are that it's really quite easy to create that content, very easy to update it, and already integrates very well with what we've already got in place in terms of learning management systems if your LMS is able to support what you're doing. A con is, of course, that you always have to be connected to the internet in order to get to some browser-based content. And you are also obviously under the influence of the quality of that internet connection itself. That classic "can you hear me now" becomes can I actually run the content now? A couple of quick thoughts then around content. Our company, dominKnow Learning Systems, does provide a tool called Claro. It's a very easy to use tool without any program, but it creates HTML5-based content as SCORM content or as web packages for you to deploy out for mobile learning devices. And it's also a web-based tool. So teams can actually work together on the development process instead of having things tied down to their hard drive and working in a more siloed fashion. It's a great tool, and we're always happy to talk to people a bit more about that. One of the things you might want to consider in terms of the content approaches that you're going to implement for your mLearning program. So it's critical to talk about the people. It's critical to gather information about the technology and to start focusing on some of the content questions that you've got as you're looking at your mLearning program. But we can never forget the fact that we've actually always got to prove business value for the things that we're doing. We can't simply make mLearning content because it's cool and it's fun and it's great. We really have to do overall prove that it's going to actually benefit our organization in the long run. So let's talk about business value for a little bit here. We always encourage people, and this ties into that whole don't just take your e-learning and shove it all onto your mLearning devices. We encourage people to look and focus on specific problems that they can solve within the organization with mLearning tools. So are there things that people are having problems doing or knowledge gaps, etc., that an mLearning program could solve? Where's the pain? What are the possible ways you could solve that? And most importantly, at times, what are the things you can actually afford to do to solve that program or solve that problem? At the same time, even though you're focusing on smaller specific problems, you always do want to keep in mind the big picture strategy as well. So it's a balancing act between solving specific issues and doing things maybe in a small way to get started, but also keeping an eye on that longer term perspective of where your mLearning program does need to go. One of the things that's always important to think about in proving business value for your mLearning program are the costs associated. And it's important to keep in mind that mLearning is usually an additional cost. It's not a replacement cost. When the world turned to e-learning as a way of delivering content, we had a lot of instructor-led training which had costs like simply travel costs, personal costs of time, people away from the job, etc. And we could make an argument that e-learning reduces and eliminates travel costs and also shortens the actual learning time that people actually spend in a classroom, etc. mLearning, you don't get that quite the same level of a replacement, and it tends to be an additional cost, not a replacement cost. If you're using existing company devices that are already in play and those associated costs are already covered for other reasons, well, then that may mean that you have a limited extra cost for what you're doing. But if you have to start bringing in new LMS products or new costs for content creation tools, or even dealing with the costs of new devices and new data packages, etc., those are all things that you've got to weigh against the problem that you're solving in terms of figuring out the business value of the mLearning program that you're going to make. The most important thing with business value is being able to demonstrate that, and probably the key tool is to make sure that you're planning as part of your project to at least do some fundamental return on investment measurement. Donald Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation is a great set of tools to be able to do that, but the key is to try to get to level 4 data. In other words, showing the results of your mLearning program compared to the cost, not just a smile sheet saying that people were enjoying the content at the level 1 type level. A simple sort of arithmetical formula for that would then be taking a task and multiplying that by the performance improvement. So think about it this way: if we could just impact X, something that's costing us money right now or is failing to make us money, if we could have an impact on X, we could save or earn the organization how much money a year. Putting it in that context is a good way to demonstrate that business value. And that's a formula that comes again from Clark Quinn in his book, Designing mLearning. Something that sometimes gets overlooked, though, when we're looking at business value isn't just the money, the revenue stream, or the cost savings, but maybe there are other business values that you can be solving as problems as well. Oh, we got a bit of a battery issue on the laptop here. Can we get one, guys, just check the battery on? I think we got ourselves unplugged here. No worries. We'll just keep going, though. So you may be able to demonstrate business value other ways than cost savings or profit margins. For instance, you might be able to demonstrate that your mLearning program can reduce organization risk overall. So it might be a personal safety issue, there might be legal risks that you're mitigating by implementing an mLearning program, or other commercial risks that might be associated. So this is something that people don't always think about, but it's an important factor in that whole business value approach of looking at what you're going to do with your mLearning program. So that's a quick whirlwind tour through as we've described it, the 4 sort of buckets that we try to get people to focus on when they're looking at their mLearning program and implementing one. Even before you start to make something, you should be taking a look at each of these areas, and particularly bringing all of that together then to focus on the business value. We consider them sort of 4 separate buckets to talk about, but there's always a lot of overlap and they influence each other. Obviously, obviously some of the decisions around content, for instance, are always going to be influenced by the actual technology for itself, etc. But very important and very critical process to be able to start your organization out on the right foot in terms of looking at an mLearning program and bringing that forward. So having splashed through that very, very quickly, I'll open up the floor to any questions that we have. And you've joined us just at the end slide here, so no worries. And if anybody has any questions, I can always be reached by email at the email address there. And we're also, of course, at booth 1701 here at the ASTD show, just down the aisle here at the other end, and happy to answer any questions around mLearning, etc. there as well.